Hello, today I'm going to be looking at a radio from WFLY. It looks like this. Has a little bit of a convoluted story behind it because WFLY contacted me and they said, hey, we have this radio module. It does long range, low latency, and I'm like, well, this is familiar. This sounds a little bit like all the other 2.4 long range, low latency systems we got at the moment, like Tracer or Ghost or Rssi. Doesn't do anything different. And they were very keen to have me test it and see what I thought. So I said, fine, send it along, and weirdly, it came attached to this radio. So what I'll be doing in this video is talking about this radio, because this radio is a bit different than what you're thinking. First off, let's get out of the box. In the box is this large piece of foam where we have this quite swish looking radio. The first thing I thought was, this looks an awful lot like one of those TX16s, like the Radio Master and stuff. It's nicely spec'd, it's got lots of switches, all effect gimbals. It has a colour touchscreen. It has a standard JR module, and it's got that module that they sent for review on the back. That wouldn't normally come. And also in the box, you have a strap, you have some spares for the radio, and then I think this is what happens. With the standard radio, you get two receivers, this sort of larger one with standard servo pins, and this smaller one you might use in quads, which is, you know, obviously a single pin, uses, I think this is probably S-Bus, I'm not sure. And then for the module, we've got these two. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about the radio here is because it's very different than what you might expect. I thought, oh, this looks a little bit like a TX16 copy. Because it looked a little bit like a TX16, I expected to be running OpenTX and stuff. But if I turn it on, this is not OpenTX. It's its own system. It's got a touchscreen that is already sort of working and do stuff with, and it sort of follows a more traditional radio. So I thought this might be handy for people that don't like OpenTX. I think OpenTX is great. But I'm coming from a programming background, so anything that I can mess about with logic gates and do my own thing is great. But I do find for many people, they find OpenTX overly confusing. So this is a more sort of standard radio with lots of wizards and has setups about putting, you know, dual rates on certain switches and things about surfaces and stuff. Very much focus a lot about fixed wing, although you can fly quads in it, obviously, as you would. And I thought, let's take a closer look, see how this works in close-up, and do some testing with it. And at some point I'll come back and review this module and see how that works.
One thing people tend to get upset about is with OpenTX there's no obvious manual. You have to kind of go and figure it out, and you might end up coming to idiots like me on YouTube finding out how to do things. Many people like a manual. WFLY has a 132-page manual. And, you know, although it's a Chinese company, it's fairly well written. There's an awful lot of pictures explaining exactly what you do, which I think is pretty good. And it's got things like example setups of what channels will do what, depending what sort of configuration of model you're flying. And it really does list them in quite good detail. The thing it's not got much detail about is multicopters, which is perhaps the thing you'd use it for less. But yeah, it goes through in immense detail about how to do bits and pieces of each type of model. There's an example of how to set up each type of model, what you'll need to set, what each of the switches do, and importantly, it's got all those colour pictures there which tell you exactly what's going on and what you do depending on what type of model you have, which is quite nice. I suppose some people might complain that it's not a physical copy of a manual, which they might like, but that said, this is fairly easy to read on a computer with it in front of you. If you wanted to use it out in the field, you can always download the PDF onto your phone and go that way. One interesting thing though from looking at the manual is when I was finding out what the USB port was for, because I figured, oh, maybe it's a charge port or maybe it's a trainer port. It's not a charge port, first off. They've made that very clear. It's also not a trainer port. There's a trainer port in the old 3.5 mil style, like the audio port. It's basically just for upgrading the firmware. And ditto on there's a receiver USB port as well. Both of these can be used for upgrading. It can't be used for using on sims and stuff or trainer. Literally just for upgrading, which is a bit of a shame because it would be nice to be able to charge and be nice to plug it into a computer to use on a sim and stuff, but you can't, so that's it. But anyway, you've got a great big manual which if you're unsure about stuff, will guide you through it, which I think is pretty nice.
Okay, here we are. Here's the radio. Just before we go around it, can you hear that? This is a little bit of a complaint I have. I've already put batteries in. This has this little thing in it which takes 18650s. But you can see it's a vast space in there. So this will basically wobble about. I think, reading the manual, because it mentions LIFE batteries, perhaps it had something that fitted in better. What you will need to do if you get one of these is shove a piece of foam down there, just something to keep it together so it doesn't rattle about everywhere. Anyway, that's the battery compartment. You can see the USB, as we've discussed, only for doing firmware updates and nothing else. So you get quite a lot of switches with this. 2 position there, we've got a momentary there, then we've got 3 positions here, 4 more 3 positions there and there. We've got sliders here, quite a strong ratchet with a central detent, one on each side. We've got similar ones here, no central detent. And then we've got 6 trim switches, interestingly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know why they're numbered like that, but there they are. Anyway, let's turn this thing on. I've got the battery in, as I've mentioned. Fairly bright screen. I've got quite bright lights just above me here, so I'm going to turn those down just a touch because they tend to wash out the screen otherwise. And you can see I've gone through and I've set some stuff up on this already, hence it says Curry K. And yeah, you can touch stuff and things will happen. So I just thought I'd take you through some of these, tell you what you've got there. We've got our system setting. There's not much in there. You'll notice it talks about voice. There is a voice on this thing. You'll notice there's no SD card slot or anything like that, but yeah, there's a voice in here. It will say certain things to you, and you've got a whole bunch of setup stuff there. Nothing too exciting. I mean, the only thing I did was basically set up my username so that appears, as you can see there. And the back colour, I've changed that very slightly to have a blue. Then you've got the general menu, where you've got a whole bunch of stuff. Monitor says what you'd expect it to. It monitors certain things. I've set up some funny models here just so I could see what would do what in terms of the mixing, and it's all quite weird and wonderful, that sort of stuff. But here you've got your model select as well. You've got a 30 model memory. 30 there, and what you can do is basically just say I have model 3. We can select it, and if we want to we can go ahead and rename this. So if this was, for example, my Bixler, and I'm doing this in the camera lens so it's a little bit difficult to see, oops, hence my typing's not as good as it could be. Hang on, let me just look at where I'm actually going. Bixler, that's better. And then it will say Bixler there instead of Model 3. So that's all good. The home screen gives you some information. I mean, you can start timers off like this. I managed to stop that again. There's a second home screen which makes things a little bit easier. You'll also notice it's got like receiver and external because it can handle certain amounts of telemetry there. And within here is where you sort of set up your model type, which is where the sort of wizard stuff comes in. So for example, this is what we've set up. This is a plane with a single servo for ailerons, and it doesn't mean a single servo, it just means a single control. So for example, if you had like a Y splitter to do your ailerons, and it's basically saying normal in terms of your rudder and elevator. But you could change that, so I could say I've got a plane, and you could say it's got 2 ailerons and 1 flap, so, and maybe it's got a V-tail, and that will set up your mix for you. We'll come on to this in a minute. We'll set something up and see how it goes. You've got things like servo reversing there. You just click on it and say, are you sure? Yep. And we got the function. So we can set up specific trim switches to specific functions, and we're talking like J1, J2 in terms of the joysticks we're using, and actually show you on screen there. And sort of very obvious things for playing stuff like dual rate setup and bits like that. All pretty sort of standard things. Some things kind of more akin to having like flight controllers in your planes and stuff, but hey, it's there. Then we've got linkage setting, which is actually where it comes to getting your radio sort of linked and stuff. And what was interesting about this, if we go to link, at the moment we've got nothing. If I change that to internal RF, you'll see the blue light comes on to say, oh, I'm using that. But we can also use an external RF, and we can say we're going to use CRSF, for example. So this does support things like Crossfire and ELRS. We got the multi-protocol module, even R9M. I don't know what WCRSF is. Look in the menu for that one. Of course, there's a slight problem. If you were going to use stuff like ELRS or Crossfire, how would you do anything with it? Because you haven't got the Lua script that you'd normally have in OpenTX. And the answer might be you might have to have something which has got the screen on the back of the module in order to do it. But you can get telemetry from here, and it seems to support things if you're using multi-protocol module and you're getting telemetry from, say, FreeSky, then it should come up here. Setting the receiver output, what channel does what. Oops. Setting your failsafe, pretty important, depending on what sort of receiver you're going to use there, or if you've got a flight control or not. Servo adjustments, and in the model menu there's some more interesting things there. So you've got things like throttle curve, throttle hold, throttle cut. Some of this is very much helicopter based things, but some interesting stuff as well, like aileron to rudder. So setting up a mix that some people like to do, instead of sort of coordinating turns with rudder and aileron, they like to just have one stick and mix in the two. So I mean, there's a lot in here, there's a lot to go through, but I thought the best way of maybe showing what happens is we can try and set something up. So if I grab out of the box this little receiver, this has some traditional PWM ports. It's got its W bus port. Oh yeah, it said compatible with S bus servos, but I don't know if that means it's just it's S bus is a different name or what. You can plug it in and see. But why don't we plug this in and find out what we got? I've got a little 4-channel plane sitting on the wall, nice and small, so we can do some stuff here. And I thought basically the best way of finding out how this works, we just plug this in. We bind it up and stuff, and then we'll see what we need to do and see what the little functions do. But that's it in a nutshell so far. But let's get on and set this up. Okay, here's this little 4-channel Voltanex plane. It's quite good fun to fly, pretty easy, pretty basic. It was a beginner one. The problem was with it was supposed to have a stabilizer, or the advertised as being, and it absolutely didn't. It just had this basic receiver. So obviously what I'm going to do, if it fits, hopefully it will, is just swap this out, and then we'll see how we bind it and make sure all the controls work and stuff. Maybe try some of those mix things. Okay, so I got all my plugs in. That's the old receiver. What I've done on the radio, I've gone and, well, this is the one I showed you earlier. Model type, standard plane, single channel for ailerons, normal 1 channel for elevator, 1 channel for rudder. Then I'm going to go to the linkage setting, and for the link I've said internal RF is on, telemetry on. There's a mode A and a mode B. This is basically your PWM channels. On mode A like 1 to 7, and on the other one they're like 7 to 14 or something. It's so you can use one of the bus channels as the smaller channels or the other channels. And then we can obviously say start the bind. What it says is I plug power in, and then I hold down the set button for 3 seconds, and and it should go into bind mode. So I'm going to try that now. It was a bit, it didn't really say you had to power on with it on, so I'm assuming you can do it afterwards, so let's give it a try.
Receiver battery 4.8 volt.
Okay, that was unexpected. You see it's gone directly to it's already bound, and you probably heard some voice from the radio saying it has some telemetry information. Well, can I make it? I didn't get to do my bind. Can I make it bind? Let's try holding it down 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. So we've got a flashing light now. So let's try doing the bind. Link start.
Receiver battery 4.8 volt.
Okay, so it was already bound for whatever reason, but that seems to have done that. So if I can just check this now, let me just shove that inside a bit. Not exactly a lot of room in this plane, but you know, you get the gist. Okay, so it's showing a receiver voltage there, which is just, you know, the back of the Rssi.
Receiver battery 4.8 volt.
Which it keeps shouting at me for some reason. I'll have to find out how to turn it off. I just wanted to check we got the controls working. So we got aileron. That's not exactly fixed on at the moment. We've got elevator down there. Rudder. Ooh, that was the throttle. Rudder's good, and throttle is all good there. So what about if, as mentioned, let's just screw this in a little bit.
Receiver battery 4.8 volt. 4.8 volt.
Well, there's several things I'd want to do. I want to turn that from telling me what's going on every 30 seconds, and maybe we want to add a dual rate to that, and maybe when we do our ailerons we want to mix in some rudder. So let's do that to see how workable this is. Okay, let's sort out that voice for starters. So system setting, telemetry voice, and what it's doing is saying it's on and it's telling me every 30 seconds. You can put that status on a switch if you want to, so you can have a switch and then it can tell you. Pretty handy if you were putting your
Battery 4.8 volt.
thank you. If you were putting your full voltage through there, then you can sort of use it as a how much voltage have I got. But for me, let's just
Receiver battery 4.8 volt.
turn it to inactive, so it shouldn't go on at me. Okay, that's one thing done. Next up, I'm thinking dual rate. So general manual, dual rate, and if I've got rate A at 100, if I have rate B at say 50. Oh, I see. It's like it's gone 50 there. Oh, so it's gone a difference between minus and plus. So let's put that down to 50 as well. So that's 50. So how do I make it then as a switch? Oh, there we go. It is a switch. What switch is it on? So then I can have a switch, and I want to use, let's use this one up here, SF. Mode 1, mode 2. Alright, I've done it round the wrong way. So when I switch, the dual rate is full. When I put it back, the dual rate's not full. So let's change that over. Okay, so what I've done is put that back to 100, and by adding that switch there, it's given me another option. So when I put the switch on, it's on number 2, and then I can change that down to 50%. Like so. So off, on. And similarly, I could make other switches there to have different rates. So let's check that out. So this is off. So elevator, ailerons 100%, and then go to 50%. A little bit hard to see, but that's 50%. That's 100%. There's a difference. Okay, so let's mix in the aileron to rudder, if we can. So what I've done, I've said it's on switch E, so if I switch it, you see it goes to status on, and then I've said rudder is 50% of my aileron inputs. So at the moment we've got aileron input full. If I change the switch, and you can see the rudder going. And there's a few little mixes like that actually. If you want to do it the other way completely, you can say actually I want to do rudder to aileron. If I turned that to on and then just move my rudder, you can see the aileron's moving when we do the rudder. And there's another one for rudder to elevator. So if you're doing a turn and you want to sort of, you feel you're dropping every time, then you can bring like the elevator up or something like that. So yeah, that's just some interesting little bits and pieces there. You can also see on this page, actually let me make this a bit bigger, it doesn't go any bigger, that we've got Rssi displayed just here for the receiver. We don't seem to see any sort of numbers for that, but we can certainly get an impression of that, and I think you've got an alarm for it as well. So that seems to work. But yeah, that's just the sort of gist of this radio. It's very different than OpenTX, but you know, I haven't been looking through the manual, and it's fairly easy just to work around these screens. I need to go back to the manual just a couple of times just to double check what some of the bits actually needed, mostly bits in like, what are you talking about here? Well, I'm talking about expo or dual rate or what, but fairly easy to set up, I think. So if you're not looking for an OpenTX radio, this might be worth a look.
So that was just a brief look at some of the functions of the radio, and the reason I went down that route is it feels to me like this is really going to suit the line of sight glider, fixed wing or helicopter pilot. There's a lot of helicopter stuff in there, but I really don't fly helicopters, so I've got no business trying to decide if that was good or bad. But everything about that felt like, oh, this is really set up to making your models easy, making the mix easy, but it was all about not having a flight controller necessarily, just being more the traditional sort of stuff there. I mean, yeah, you can add in an external module and you could run things like Crossfire if you wanted to, but like I said, there's no lure interface to do stuff with, so there's restrictions there. But the radio feels pretty nice. The nice Hall effect gimbals, sits in the hands nicely. The only complaint, as I mentioned, is the way it rattles because of the battery size there. And this isn't a case of like, oh yeah, get this instead of like the Radio Master TX16, because they are different radios. You're either in one camp. You're in the OpenTX camp, in which case you've got Radio Master, FreeSky, et al. And then you've got the sort of more proprietary type operating system where it's, I suppose it's more friendly for some people. Personally, I prefer the OpenTX way of doing things. I like to be able to do anything to anything and not have whizzes to do stuff. I just like to go in and do my mixes manually. But if you don't, then, you know, previously you were in sort of Futaba or Spectrum land, and they're pretty expensive. This is cheaper. It's not super cheap. It's about the same price as stuff like the Radio Master TX16, because it's got things, you know, like the colour screen and the Hall effect gimbals and all the bits like that. But yeah, it feels pretty good. Obviously, I want to come back and fly with this, and one of the other things I need to do is check out what this module does. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it works with other modules, what sort of stuff you get back on the telemetry, bits and pieces like that. If you've got a specific question about what you'd like me to check out, you can shove it in the comments below and I will try and do that. In the meantime, this has been the WFLY ET16S radio, kindly supplied by WFLY. Thanks very much to them. And of course, you'll find links down below where you can check out more detail. As I said, I want to come back, fly it, do some different things with it, see how it works. But until that time, I hope that's been helpful. See you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.